The ABC interview with Donald Trump in the Oval Office with Terry Moran was fascinating for several reasons. Firstly, it exposed that Donald Trump clearly is on the receiving end of elder abuse, that he really knows nothing about what's going on in his administration, only what he reads in the newspapers. And it's very clear to me that there are people with a much more focused and ambitious attitude towards shifting the US to a dark, dangerous, authoritarian place that are clearly pulling the strings. Donald Trump claims that he doesn't make the decisions, that he can't call the El Salvadorian president to get Kilmar Abrego Garcia back because there are lawyers and they're the ones who are making the decisions. I mean, it was really, really odd. And so I thought it would be worth us looking at some of the most extreme moments in this interview and talking about how Donald Trump really is a puppet of who? The broligarchs, Vladimir Putin, but also people closer to home, people like Stephen Miller, working in the Oval Office with a direct line to others who are really deciding the fate of many of these policies and their effects on American citizens.
Hello, everybody. How are you? This is the Oval Office. This is the Resolute Desk, which is really something very spectacular. There's nothing quite like it.
I see Ronald Reagan over there.
Yeah, Ronald Reagan.
Right to your left.
Being in the Oval Office is very important. See Ronald Reagan here, and put him a little bit larger. It sort of seemed to fit very nicely. You have Democrats a little bit. You have
Franklin Roosevelt.
And then, of course, you have the Declaration of Independence.
What does it mean to you?
Well, it means exactly what it says. It's a declaration. It's a declaration of unity and love and respect, and it means a lot. And it's something very special to our country.
Firstly, Donald Trump kind of was treated to a little tour of the Oval Office from a kind of very low-seated position behind the Resolute Desk, and they were looking around the room, pointing at various presidents and historical figures that Trump was very proud of, many of whom he couldn't recall the names of. He was needing help with that, but also the fact that he has clearly pimped the Oval Office to make it look more like Mar-a-Lago or possibly looking like a Russian palace. But it's also been exposed that some of these gold friezes that he's applied to certain parts of the room on the walls and above the fireplace are from Home Depot. They cost $50. He's clearly had them sprayed in some kind of gold spray and mounted. As with Trump, you know, everything is not what it seems, and invariably it's cheap.
I've added a lot to the space in terms of beautification. In terms of modernization, that's
a gallery of presidents.
It really is. It really is. So, and it's an honor to have you people with us.
He is very much of the opinion that he can do whatever he wants. The Constitution is irrelevant. The courts are irrelevant. He's taken this gift from the Supreme Court of this blanket immunity and is clearly running with it. And it seems that the White House counsel that he has are also very much into the Project 2025 agenda, and they have no respect for diversity, no respect for inclusivity, no respect for human rights or civil rights, and so they've allowed him to kind of steamroll through a lot of these announcements without really considering the legal position that previous presidents would have to take into consideration.
People are worried, even some people who voted for you saying, I didn't sign up for this. So how do you answer those concerns?
Well, they did sign up for it, actually, and this is what I campaigned on. I said that we've been abused by other countries at levels that nobody's ever seen before. We were losing $3 to $5 billion a day on trade. We were losing $1.5 trillion to $2 trillion a year, not sustainable. They were taking advantage of us like they've never. I could have left it that way, and at some point there would have been an implosion like nobody's ever seen.
It's clear to me that he cares really only about the image that he portrays in the newspapers. And to care for people, to be a president for all Americans and all of that stuff is just so far from his reality.
When I took over, you remember the big thing with eggs. They hit me the first week, eggs, like it was my fault. I said, I didn't cause this problem. This problem was caused by Biden. What's the problem with eggs? And they said, they've doubled. And well, eggs are down 87% since I got involved.
A lot of that is bird flu. And by the way,
and there were plenty of eggs for Easter.
Trump's position on immigration is very scary for those people who were worried that he was purposely not allowing asylum seekers a due process. Now have had their worst fears confirmed, because it's clear that he doesn't really understand what seeking asylum is. And we now have come to realize that all that talk about Hannibal Lecter and they're coming out of prisons and they're coming from asylums, he's obviously heard people are seeking asylum, and he thinks that means they're coming from mental institutions, from mental asylums. This is the level of intellect that this man has, but also the level of interest that this man has in humanity, in immigration as a whole. You know, his family were immigrants. His wife is an immigrant. His in-laws are immigrants. I mean, surely you don't get to the age of 78 and not understand what seeking asylum is and how international law has a place in every nation.
But there are questions about your methods. And so I want to ask
about my message?
Methods. About your methods, how you're accomplishing
this. They seem to work.
Do you acknowledge that under our law, every single person who gets deported gets a hearing first to make their case?
Well, are we talking about people that are citizens of our country or not?
No, you're not deporting citizens at this point.
Well, let me ask you, did they get hearings when Biden allowed 21 million, because I think the number is 20 million people to flow into our country?
This is what we're dealing with. We are literally dealing with an imbecile. And when an imbecile gets elected, it's important that the media and the journalism and people who take an interest don't drop to his level, that we maintain the critical thinking that he is incapable of.
Some of the roughest countries in the world they had here, including terrorists, by the way. Now,
but
did we give them a hearing when they came in?
Well, the law requires that every single person who is going to be deported gets a hearing first.
Well,
do you acknowledge that?
I'll have to ask the lawyers about that. All I can say is this. If you're going to have 21 million people, and if we have to get a lot of them out because they're criminals, we're going to have to act fast. We can't. Do you think we can give 21 million trials? Let's say each trial takes 2 weeks. Is that what you want us to do?
The law
give
is the law,
million?
sir. The law is the law, and you're
the law
sworn
doesn't
to
say anything
uphold it.
about trials.
No, not trials, hearings. I said
These
hearings.
people came in, they're not citizens. They came in illegally. They came into our country illegally.
And
we have to get them out.
There's a legal process for that.
I can't, sure, and we follow the legal process. I can't have a trial, a major trial for every person that came in illegally. We have thousands of murderers that came in. They're going to murder people. They already have murdered people in our country.
Right, so
we have to get them out, and we have to get them out fast.
Really bad guys, but in our country, even bad guys get due process, right?
If people come into our country illegally, there's a different standard. These are illegal. They came in illegally.
But they get due process.
Well, they get a process where we have to get them out. Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about the Venezuelans.
They get whatever my lawyers say.
This is the moment that he clarifies his position, and clearly the position of the White House counsel and those, clearly Tom Homan and Kristi Noem and any of these people who are doing work at the border, that they do not believe that people who are not Americans, born in America, not even naturalized citizens, not even immigrants who have paperwork that gives them indefinite leave to remain or any of these things. They just think that anybody that is not as American as Donald Trump doesn't deserve due process, doesn't deserve to be up in front of an immigration judge, doesn't deserve to even have a case, and therefore they should be deported. And the thing that we also need to remember is that Trump is not deporting people back to their home countries necessarily, or their places of birth. He's deporting many of them to concentration camps in countries that they've never been to before, such as El Salvador. And this is why it's important that we maintain this language and talk about these places as concentration camps, and how he thinks that it's better paying El Salvador $5 million to house these people, which he says he wants to expand. And of course, he was overheard talking to the El Salvadorian president and saying, it's the homegrowns next.
He deported more than 200 Venezuelans to that prison in El Salvador. You say they're violent, they're gang members, they're terrorists. Many of them don't have a criminal record at all.
Well,
but I want to.
I'm not so sure about that. If you take a look,
I want to read you something.
Excuse me. When you look at those people, they were violent people. They were violent people.
But many of them don't have a criminal record
Go
at this
ahead.
point.
I want
to
read
read
you
you
say.
something. Well, it's based on their lawyer, what their lawyers have said. Okay.
It's also important to remember that, he thinks that anybody who is a bad hombre needs to be deported, and he is doing good work, and that this is what his base voted for. His base certainly did not vote to remove people without due process. And this is really the kind of crux of this. But what's interesting is that Trump himself is a felon. He himself wouldn't pass muster for his own set of rules regarding deportations. Maybe he wants to self-deport because, he has all of these charges against him, and he's managed to kind of slip through the fingers of justice by nature of becoming president of the United States again.
And I was elected to get him out, and we're getting him out
under the law.
And we're getting him out fast, and we're getting him out legally. Now, in some cases, we have judges. In some cases, they're radical left judges. What happened the other day where a judge was protecting a criminal was horrible. And I think she's got big problems, frankly. And there are a couple of them like that.
I want to talk about one
Wait
man.
a minute.
Yep.
We have to be treated fairly by judges. And we're not being treated fairly by all judges.
Oh, that's a subject. So you're saying that you don't like some of the rulings, some of the court orders?
I think the rulings will be overturned, yeah.
All right. Let me ask you about one man and one court order. Kilmar Abrego Garcia. He's the Salvadoran man who crossed into this country illegally, but who is under a protective order that he not be sent back to El Salvador. Your government sent him back to El Salvador and acknowledged in court that was a mistake. And now the Supreme Court has upheld an order that you must return him facilitate his return to the United States. What are you doing to comply?
Well, the lawyer that said it was a mistake was here a long time, was not appointed by us, should not have said that, And just so you understand, the person that you're talking about, you're making this person sound, this is a MS-13 gang member, a tough cookie, been in lots of skirmishes, beat the hell out of his wife, and the wife was petrified to even talk about him, okay?
This issue with Kilmar Abrego Garcia is exposed here for what we all thought was, propaganda, that they, photoshopped MS-13 on his knuckles in this photo, and that Trump knew that it was photoshopped, but he was using it, and this was his excuse for deporting him to El Salvador. And it turns out that Trump, and I assume that he genuinely doesn't know that those letters on the knuckles were photoshopped.
This is not an innocent, wonderful gentleman from Maryland.
I'm not saying he's a good guy. It's about the rule of law. The order from the Supreme Court stands, sir.
He came into our country illegally.
You could get him back. There's a phone on this desk.
I could.
You could pick it up, and with all the power of the presidency, you could call up the president of El Salvador and say, send him back right now.
And if he were the gentleman that you say he is, I would do that.
But the court has ordered you to facilitate that.
I'm not the one making this decision. We have lawyers that don't want to do this.
But the buck stops in this office.
No. I follow the law. You want me to follow the law? If I were the president that just wanted to do anything, I'd probably keep him right where he is.
Supreme Court says what the law is.
Listen, I was elected to take care of a problem. We have to get him out, and we're doing it.
By law.
And you'll pick out one man, but even the man that you picked out, he said he wasn't a member of a gang. And then they looked, and on his knuckles, he had MS-13.
There's a dispute
Well, wait a minute. He had MS-13 on his knuckles tattooed.
He had some tattoos that are interpreted that way. But let's move on.
Wait a minute. Hey, Terry. Terry.
He did not have the
Don't do that.
letter MS13.
It says MS13.
That was Photoshop. So let me
That
just...
was Photoshop. Terry, you can't do that. Hey, they're giving you the big break of a lifetime. You know, you're doing the interview. I picked you because, frankly, I never heard of you, but that's okay. I picked you, Terry, but you're not being very nice. He had MS-13 tattooed.
Right, we'll agree to disagree. I want to move on to something else.
Terry, do you want me to show you the picture?
I saw the picture. We'll
and you think it
agree
was
to disagree.
Photoshop? Well,
Here we go.
Don't Photoshop it. Go look at his hand. He
Fair
had
enough.
MS-13.
He did have tattoos that can be interpreted that way. I'm not an expert on them. I want to turn to Ukraine,
No,
sir.
Terry,
I want to get to Ukraine.
No. He had MS as clear as you can be, not interpreted. This is why people no longer believe the news, because
when
it's
he was
fake
photographed
news.
in El Salvador, they aren't there. But let's just go on. They aren't there when he's in El Salvador.
They weren't there, but they're there now, right?
No,
but
they're in
now.
your picture.
Terry.
Ukraine, sir.
He's got MS-13 on his knuckles.
All right.
Okay?
All right. We'll take a look.
You do such a disservice.
We'll take a look at that,
Why don't
sir.
you just say, yes, he does, and, go on to something else?
It's contested.
In other photos, there is no MS-13. In this kind of Helvetica, his size 14 is really not how a gang member would want to kind of present their membership of the gang. But that aside, Donald Trump repeatedly goes back to this. And even when the reporter tries to move on, Trump goes, no. Do you want to look at the photo? I'll show you the photo. He had MS-13. And if Trump is that gullible about something that is so obvious to anybody with critical thought, that a photograph has clearly been photoshopped, if he's that gullible about that, think how gullible he is about other things that people bring to him and pass across his desk for signature. Just think about the number of policies that he clearly knows nothing about, that he's told something and he's told to sign. And this is why I mentioned at the beginning that I'm starting to see this as elder abuse, that the people around him who have this agenda, the Project 2025 people who, Russell Vogt, for example, people who are embedded into the administration now, are having him sign documents that he is not of sound mind and therefore really unable to sign. And that would suggest that, the 25th Amendment or some mechanism for removing the president would be essential, but there is clearly nobody to do that. Nobody, certainly in the Republican Party, would sanction that type of thing right now because they see themselves as winning. And so this interview, for me, kind of exposes what we're dealing with. We're dealing with an old, senile man who is being taken advantage of. And, it's a little bit like the Younger family taking all the inheritance by forcing the dying elder to sign the will against his will. That's what it feels like. And Trump is just in this for the show business. He likes having the 747 on a stand because he's desperate to have, the new Air Force One on his watch. He has the poster of the Gulf of America that was the Gulf of Mexico, because these are the things that he likes. He likes the kind of the theatrical trappings of the presidency. The reality is that he's spent more than 50% of his time on the golf course at great expense to American taxpayers. He is not in control. And so he is a figurehead who obviously is a racist, and therefore he has certain views about immigrants and kind of xenophobic positions. And obviously he hates women and he hates himself. I mean, this is all pretty clear. But this, to me, interview, this kind of exposed that he really is being used and abused by others. And that is why this regime is so authoritarian, because all of the impulses of these far-right Christian nationalist extremists working behind the scenes are being facilitated by Donald Trump's dementia and his lack of consciousness and his inability to ask questions or to think critically or to behave like any previous presidents in history who have sought counsel, an exchange of ideas, a volley of thought. None of that with this guy. He's basically given a good idea And he's like, yep, that's a great idea. And then he'll just sign it off. And the legal ramifications and the due process and the respect for case law and civil rights and all of the things that are going by the wayside are not a consideration for him or for those people who are kind of running the show behind the scenes.
I think if I didn't win the election, he would have gotten all of Ukraine. I think he would have taken all of Ukraine. I think his first choice, never with me, he would have never gone in. Ukraine was the apple of his eye. I think he wanted the whole country.
You've said for months.
Because of me, I do believe that he's willing to stop the fighting. Don't forget,
you think he wants
this
peace?
is
You think Vladimir Putin wants peace?
I think he does, yes. I think
Still.
he does. I think
Even with the raining missiles
I
on.
think he really, his dream was to take over the whole country. I think because of me, he's not going to do that.
And when it comes to Ukraine, he's asked, does Vladimir Putin want to end this war? And he's like, yes, I think he does. And then he's like, well, no, he wants to take all of Ukraine. I mean, there is no consistency of thought here. We are dealing with somebody who is completely out of their depth when it comes to diplomacy and international relations and dealing, in this case, with a war zone. He just has no idea. He makes up numbers about the numbers of people killed, and he clearly does not have a direct line to Putin. He is being played by Putin in the same way as he's being played by Xi Jinping in China. Trump is not the great deal maker that he told us. He cannot end the war in 24 hours or even in 100 days. Trump wants to do trade with Russia. He wants to drop sanctions. He wants to have a, Trump Tower Moscow. He wants to be on a par with Putin. He wants to be in that exclusive club of dictators. The oligarchy is where his meal ticket is. When it came to those golden tickets at $5 million a pop, he was like, yeah, well, I know plenty of oligarchs and some of them are very nice people and they're going to be first in line. It is so offensive and contradicts his views on immigration and having bad hombres in the country. Clearly, the Russian billionaires don't count.
Do you trust him? Do you trust him?
I don't trust you. I don't trust a lot of people. I don't trust you. Look at you. You come in all shooting for bear. You're so happy to do the interview.
I am
and
happy.
Then you start hitting me with fake questions. You start telling me that a guy whose hand is covered with a tattoo doesn't have the tattoo.
All right.
I mean, you're being dishonest.
No, I'm not.
Let me
I
just
am
tell
not,
you,
sir.
I don't trust a lot of people. But I do think this. I think that let's say he respects me. And I believe because of me, he's not going to take over the whole. But his decision, his choice would be to take over all of Ukraine. We also found tremendous waste, fraud, and abuse, as you know. We found a lot of fraud. There was a lot of fraud. Fraudulent things were taking place. And we ended that, and those people are going to be suffering because of it.
A legal note, fraud is a crime. There have been no referrals to the Justice Department on any.
Well, you don't know that, do you? How do you know that?
Have there been referrals to the? Are there criminal referrals?
How would you know that there were no referrals? I think there were referrals.
They generally are. There's been no investigation from the Justice Department.
How do you know that?
I'm asking you, sir.
No, you're not asking me. You made a statement. You're not
now
asking
I'm
me.
asking you.
That was a statement that you made. There have
I'm
been.
asking you.
Have there been? Yes, there have.
So there have been referrals for fraud from the workers'
department. Take a look at some of these things that took place. Billions of dollars were given to people for no reason whatsoever. Of course they have.
The reporter quite rightly asks if there's fraud, why hasn't this been referred to the Department of Justice? If fraud is a crime. And Trump says, how do you know it hasn't? And this kind of weird sequence now where Trump is trying to defend the indefensible because all of these things would be in public records. But Trump is always working on the assumption that no one's going to check. And that's why he says things like, as you know, when we don't know, because it's not true. As we know, in 6 months, we will be in the midst of one of the deepest, darkest recessions. And the supply chain and all of the stuff that we experienced during COVID will happen again because of Trump's reckless decisions on tariffs that are not based in any kind of sound economic thinking. Just a whim. Everything from Trump is just a whim. He doesn't understand trade or international trade. He looks at these deficits and he doesn't seem to realize that because the US has a much larger economy, then of course it's likely that we're going to be spending more than other countries. It does not mean they are ripping us off. But he doesn't get that because he is somebody who is entirely transactional with not just with business, but with people. And he is entirely the wrong person to be a president. He shouldn't even be the president of a golf club, let alone of the most powerful country in the world.
What do you say to people who are concerned you are seizing too much power and becoming an authoritarian president like we haven't had before?
No, I would hate them to think that. I'm doing one thing. I'm making America great again. We have a country that was failing. We have a country that was laughed at all over the world. We had a leader that was grossly incompetent. He should have never been there. The election was rigged. He should have never been there. Our country suffered greatly, and now our country's coming back like nobody can believe. I have editorials just today where they're saying they've never seen anything like it. They love it. Our country's coming back, and we're respected again.
And finally, when asked if he realizes the extent of the authoritarianism, this kind of dictatorship that America is now living under, and how people are scared and are genuinely worried about the direction the country is being taken, he claims to not see it, doesn't get it. He says, I don't want to be thought of like that. Well, he does. This is all Trump wants. He wants to be up there with the toughest people in history, from Hitler and Mussolini through Stalin and Vladimir Putin. These are the people that he idolizes, and this is the Hall of Fame that he wants to be a part of. He wants his face on Mount Rushmore. He wants his face on a dollar bill. He just wants credit and recognition, and he thinks that the tougher he is and the more ruthless he is and the stronger he is, because strong men ultimately are his idols, that will kind of give him access to this special place in history. What he doesn't realize is that he's on the wrong side of history, and that the more he tries to flex his muscles, the more the courts will lean on him, and the more pushback there will be, the more people will protest, and the more destabilized the country becomes. And as the country is destabilized, the world is destabilized. And it is all the responsibility of him, of one man, whose ego, whose selfishness, and whose greed is responsible for crashing world economies and ruining millions of lives.
Well, it means exactly what it says. It's a declaration. It's a declaration of unity and love and respect to our country.
I'm Anthony Davis. You can find me on the 5 Minute News YouTube channel and podcast, on Wednesdays co-hosting Uncovered, and on Sunday on The Weekend Show with MeidasTouch.
Love this video? Continue the conversation by following us on Instagram @MeidasTouch and help us blow past 1 million followers.